It's a hands-on, no-holds-barred, do-or-die adventure. It's Smash TV until we win. Smash TV was a pretty popular arcade game released in 1990, developed by Eugene Jarvis and Mark Turmel for Williams Electronic Games. Yes, you got that right. This game was made by the same Eugene Jarvis that made Defender, Stargate, Robotron 2048, Blaster, Narc, and the Cruisin' series. Eugene got his start in the pinball world developing Time 2000, Airborne Avenger, and Superman for Atari, as well as Laserball, Firepower, Space Shuttle, High Speed, and F-14 Tomcat for Williams. And yeah, he worked with Mark Turmel. Yes, that Mark Turmel, the same one that designed WWF WrestleMania, Total Carnage, and NBA Jam. He also had his hand in amazing games like NFL Blitz and NHL Open Ice 2-on-2 Challenge, and if you don't think NHL Open Ice 2-on-2 Challenge is an amazing game, well, I mean, I can't convince you otherwise, so whatever. So, Smash TV is pretty awesome. The original arcade version was a spiritual successor to Robotron 2048. It features a similar dual joystick control system that was very unique at the time. You would use one joystick, your left joystick, to move, and the other joystick, your right joystick, to fire in any of 8 directions. A really cool concept that absolutely hampered the home releases. Which, speaking of the home releases, Smash TV was released on quite the list of home platforms, including the Amiga, Amstrad CPC, Commodore 64, ZX Spectrum, NES, Atari ST, Genesis, Sega Master System, Super Nintendo, and of course, the Game Gear. Because who could forget the classic release of an arcade game on the Game Gear? Smash TV would also get a brief modern-day resurrection, being released on the GameCube, PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC in the Midway Arcade Treasures collection, and would also see release on the Xbox 360 Games Store. Now, I like to think this, but maybe it's not true, maybe it is true, but I think Smash TV is both a biting criticism of American culture and the lengths at which people are willing to go to in order to win big money and big prizes, as well as an awesome video game with a great RoboCop reference.
I'd buy that for $1.
The game is simple. You are a contestant on a hyper-violent game show whose only task is to blow shit up and survive long enough to collect prizes. The more prizes you collect, the higher the score you get. Smash TV is an overhead shooter with seemingly endless waves of enemies pouring out of each of the 4 doors of the room. Each level is comprised of several rooms you must traverse in order to get to the stage boss, and let me just say this right now, you're gonna die. A lot. Now, the NES version is both an amazing port of an arcade game and an amazing pain in the ass. You see, since the arcade game used 2 joysticks for movement and firing, and the NES only has 6 buttons, 4-way directional and 2 function buttons, Smash TV is a little difficult to replicate. So the developers did something ingenious. They allowed you to use 2 NES controllers to control the game. Now, I didn't have 2 NES controllers, so I had to use the alternative 1-controller method. This method allows you to lock your firing position in place. By moving in a direction and pressing the B button, you lock your firing in one direction, which you can then automatically fire with A. And if you've ever played Smash TV, you know that this configuration is just mean. Because of the absolute horde of enemies on the screen, you really need to be able to fire in any direction at a moment's notice. Well, I ended up using the alternative method, and let me tell you something, my thumbs hate me. I recommend maybe bandaging your thumbs up before you play this game, because my left thumb still has a scar from the bleeding that happened. There are several items in this game, and pretty much all of them are very important. The first one we're going to talk about are the extra lives. The extra lives are like the cheesecake of this game. You see the cheesecake, you want the cheesecake, but you can't have the cheesecake because it's either never there when you need it, or some other fat ass saw the last 12 cheesecakes at the supermarket and decided to buy all of them at once, and when you question him about his eating habits, he says he's going to eat all of them just to spite you. Fuck that guy. There are a pair of legs in this game which gives you the ability to run, and running fast in this game, with hordes of enemies as they are, is a very good thing. The rocket is the most powerful weapon in this game, and it flies through multiple enemies until it hits the room walls. It's best used against larger enemies, but it's also helpful in later stages against the unending hordes. The rotating blades are a defensive item that circle around you and hit enemies a few times before flying off. They act somewhat as a barrier, but they don't stop enemies from sneaking through the holes and hitting you. The shield is a temporary invincibility item that lets you walk through enemies and blow them up, except for bosses, of course. It behaves exactly like you think it would and only lasts for a very, very short time. The grenades are a fantastic weapon against some of the bosses. Against everything else, though, they tend to be a rather large pain in the ass. The weapon's really strong, but it's not the most useful in the game because of its sporadic firing pattern. The shotgun, the scatter gun, or the three-way shot is just that, a three-way shot. It's slightly more powerful than your base weapon, but it is, hands down, the single best weapon when you need crowd control. This weapon becomes almost invaluable later on in the game because of the number of enemies on screen. Level 1 is a fairly simple affair and introduces you to the basic mechanics of the game: dodge shit and shoot shit. You'll run into a few unique enemies in this level. The hulking clubbers are just dudes in green that walk up to you and smash you in the fucking head. Essentially, don't walk into them and you're fine. There are bombs that fire shrapnel off in 8 directions, and they're pretty tough. They're slow-rolling bombs that move about the outside of the room, then explode, sending shrapnel in 8 directions, adding more stuff on the screen for you to dodge. Wall gunners are kind of a pain in the ass to deal with, since all they do is add to the list of stuff you've got to avoid. They're easy to get rid of if you can find the space to shoot them without the horde getting in the way. Now, 2 wall gunners in a room? Well, that makes them priorities number 1 and 2. Red orbs are probably the most annoying enemy in the game. They fly around in a semi-random orbit. One touch from them and you're dead. The good thing is that they die as a pack. The bad thing is that they take a lot of damage before they go down. The majority of level 1 is just that. The clubbers, the bombs, and the red orbs come at you in larger and more profound waves. Now, getting to the stage boss, Mutoid Man, isn't that difficult. Beating Mutoid Man can be a bit of a challenge, though. Mutoid Man is a very basic boss. He tries to ram you and hit you with his eye lasers. Either you want to get lucky and get the speed up upgrade, or you want to stay as far away from Mutoid Man as possible. Line him up from diagonal really works well, and fire away at him. Eventually, you'll knock off both of his arms and his head. Once that happens, you'll reveal, well, a second head, which was apparently controlling Mutoid Man Krang style from the inside. Or at least that's what I tell myself. It doesn't make any sense. Does it need to make sense? It's Smash TV. So here's a tip that'll stop you from dying. Don't stop moving. This version of Mutoid Man fires lasers from his eyes that reach across the entire room. If you stop moving, you get zapped. And you don't want to get zapped, because getting zapped means you die. And dying is the antithesis of winning. So don't do that. Your best option is to just keep moving and take pot shots at the rolling head when you can, and then you go on to level 2. In level 2, you're going to be introduced to one of the most annoying enemies in the game, the turtle shells, or flying orbs, really. Flying orbs are a pain in the ass. They stop, face a direction, and fire a laser beam that covers the entire width of the room. It's not that this attack is hard to avoid. It's pretty easy for 1 or 2 orbs. It's that most rooms that have these orbs have a damned billion of them on the screen, and keeping track of which one is shooting what is horrible. I recommend getting the shotgun and blasting away at a lot of them, but look out, because once you hit them, they start to spin out of control and bounce off of the walls. There are also these flying yellow robots on this level. They might be the worst of the lot. It has a strange AI that follows you at weird angles. Worst of all, every time they're in a room, these robots swarm the living hell out of you. You've got to keep moving if you don't want to get swarmed to death, and, well, you know, hey, dying sucks. Tanks are also introduced in this level. They're not too difficult to deal with so long as you kill them quickly, otherwise their hail of gunfire can be a bit of a mess. Level 2 also introduces mechanical worms to the fight. These floating orbs/worms aren't the most difficult enemies to face, but they can get annoying since they can corner you. Keep firing to knock them back and take them down. Now, level 2 is a bit longer than level 1, so staying alive long enough to get to the end boss is mostly going to be about life management. You can afford to lose a couple of lives along the way, but if you start going down too quickly, chances are you're screwed. The end boss of level 2 is Scarface, and he's actually kind of easy if you know the tricks. His first form is basically just a big blob with shielding around his body. You need to destroy all of the armor before you can get to the second phase. Once his armor is down, you have to keep hitting him. This is where the arcade and home ports differ. In the arcade version, the only way to hurt Scarface is with the grenade weapon, making attacking him really dangerous. In the home ports, any weapon will do, making the second phase a whole heck of a lot easier. Once you take down Scarface, he'll have his final phase. He'll explode and reveal a giant skull. This isn't too difficult, just hit the various sections of the skull. Scarface is faster and deadlier, shooting 2 projectiles at a time out of his eyes. You'll need to move around a lot to take him down in this form, but once he explodes after being the skull, Scarface is down for good. Level 3 is the final level in this game, and it's a bit of a nightmare. It takes all the same enemies from the first 2 levels and amps up the spawn rates to near infinity. Each room in level 3 ends up being quite long and sometimes tedious because of the sheer number of enemies that come pouring out of the doorways. This level also introduces us to the wonderful world of snakes. These little creatures come swarming down from the top of the screen in addition to the waves of enemies you have to face. Now, they go down in one hit, but they absorb the hit that could otherwise take out an enemy that's about to club you over the head. They're annoying. Of course, level 3 really and unnecessarily ramps up the difficulty once you hit the Buffalo Gun room. This pain-in-the-ass room is a nearly never-ending horde of flying yellow robots, with the usual ramp-up in the number of spawns and the spawn rate. In addition, you'll get to face off against my most hated enemy of the game, the flying red orbs. The strategy in this room is really simple: never stop moving. Ever. Of course, this doesn't work all the time since the robots just refuse to slow down on their spawn rates, and you have to deal with the red flying orbs. Each robot you take down instantly adds another one to the list of robots that have spawned. Eventually, you'll hack your way to the level boss, the Cobra. This boss is more of a learn-to-dodge boss than a really difficult learn-when-to-attack boss. The trick here is to never stop attacking while dodging a plethora of projectiles. The Cobra will eventually split into 2, doubling the number of projectiles on the screen. Stick and move, little Max, stick and move, and eventually you'll take him out. Now, the arcade version and the home ports once again diverge here and differ. In the arcade version, you were supposed to collect keys in order to unlock 3 secret rooms. They were a pain in the ass to find, and if you didn't take the correct path, you could never get them, nor get the real ending of the game. In the original home ports of the game, though, they just sort of forgot about the keys, so you get to prance your way into the 3 key rooms. Hooray. Key Room 1 is home to a nearly limitless supply of turtle orbs. Yeah, those same orbs that fire screen-wide lasers. The spawn rate and number of enemies on the screen is ramped up to its maximum here. My only piece of advice: good luck. That's a lot of lasers to keep track of. If you're lucky, then you'll be able to establish yourself in a corner, but you've got to keep an eye open for when an orb is setting up to take you out. If you hit him fast enough, the laser will never fire, and you'll be able to stay safe. Key Room 2 is wave after wave after wave after wave of clubbing hulks. It's almost comical how many of these guys there are. The trick to staying alive here is going to be nearly perfect timing to dodge the new assault wave so you can get behind an entire group and blast away at them. And this one is a very, very long battle. Once you beat the swarms, you get to face the real end boss, the show host. I always knew he's a robot. Well, it turns out that essentially the show host is just a reskinned Mutoid Man. And actually, as far as end bosses are concerned, this one is really a disappointment. The guy fights exactly like Mutoid Man, and if you've gotten to this part, then you already know how to beat him, and you don't need me how to tell you. Well, hey, at least you can enjoy the credits, right? And we'd also like to thank our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/LordCat, Salsa Bear Studios at salsabearstudios.com, Sanguine Games at sanguinegames.com, Power Gamer at powergamer.co, Carlos Antonio, Times at twitter.com/timesgamer, The Enforcer, twitter.com/180enforcer, Jimpan666 at twitter.com/Jimpan666. Also thanks to Suicune, Mossad, Anton, and Ambrasion.